Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of End Zone to End Zone, our podcast about the marching arts. We are so thrilled to have a guest with us today. This is Dr. Brian Tinkle. Brian is a collegiate level educator at Mars Hill University and somebody who has taught an absolute ton of drum corps as well at the highest levels again and again and again. So he really, if anybody knows the recipe to success, it's got to be you at this point. But he is he is also known to many, maybe not in these words, but at least in concept, as the man with the plan. He is a fantastic orchestrator of organizations as well as pedagogy and actually getting your hands in and teaching. So I think we're going to get into a lot of great topics today, a lot of things we can learn from no matter where you are as a director, as a teacher, or even as a student. We are really, really lucky to get to spend some time with Brian today and so glad that he could join us. We have everything you could possibly want coming up today. So hang in there. It's going to be a great episode. And let us know in the comments if you have any questions from any of these stories and information that you get as we go through things. So let's kick it off.
Yeah, let's do it.
We wanted to start talking about auditions. I know for drum corps, everyone just kind of went through that, but this is a yearly thing, and I know these episodes will live on. So I know you've been through a lot of auditions as a player and as students auditioning for groups that you're in charge of, right?
Yes, sir.
So could you share some memorable audition experiences from your own career? Anything that comes to mind in the world of auditions?
Sure, absolutely. So let's see, it would have been in the fall of 1989, I went to my first drum corps camp, which was the Boston Crusaders. And I was thankful to have a friend in my high school drum line that had marched there. So, back in those days, we weren't getting a packet emailed to us. It was basically word of mouth, and if you knew somebody that had been in the group, you would go and be around that person and learn the exercises. And I remember him saying, you need to know these, you need to know what you're doing. You got to have these exercises down to make an impression on the staff. And so, of course, that was the plan. I mean, I was 15 years old, so I was pretty nervous. And we drove up to Boston for our first camp, and I wanted to, at that time I was auditioning for the tenor line, but the reality was I just wasn't the player that I needed to be to make that section. But I believe that they kind of liked my preparation, so they were quickly like, let's move you over to the bass line. I think you could do a good job there. And, so I embraced that, went over there and quickly learned the notes. And I remember after, it was like Saturday night, and we didn't have stands back then, right? So I'm a 15 wearing like a number 4 bass drum. And it hurt. It was painful. And I remember being very nervous because these people who I was around had marched in the line for years. And all of a sudden my legs started to go numb. And next thing I knew, I fell over and landed. I fell over and was like wearing the drum, and it was like this. And the section leader stepped out and cut, and everyone was, everybody was at attention. And he came over and he looked at me. He said, "Get up." And I tried to get up and I couldn't because my legs were, legs weren't working.
Yeah.
So, he got back in there and tapped it off, and I eventually, found my way back into the line. But that's a very memorable experience.
Right. Winding up on your back, and who knows what carrier. I guess it cut off the blood to your legs or whatever.
The carriers were pretty terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Not the cushy stuff y'all have today.
No way.
Yeah.
No, it was, I mean, I was super skinny, and we had like these champion sweatshirts back in those days, and I would fold mine up and put it across my hips for that not to happen again.
Right.
Yeah. So that was a memorable moment.
I'd say. Yeah. Did it work out? Did you make that bass line?
I made that bass line.
Okay.
Yeah.
15
it worked
years
out.
old.
Yeah.
So did that kind of, I mean, marching that summer at 15, whole new world, obviously?
Whole new world, probably the hardest thing I ever did, for sure, except wrestling, in terms of what it feels like in a minute.
Sure.
But definitely the hardest experience, any drum corps summer in that regard was that way. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I actually loved the bass line. I mean, I had no idea. At first, when you get moved, the reaction is like, oh, I'm going to another section, and
sure.
and I get that, and I felt that way. But then I quickly was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool, and formed great friendships. And actually, when the next year came around, I wanted to stay in the bass line, so I marched again.
2 years.
On bass, and then my third year, I went to tenors.
Cool.
With Boston.
Yeah. Sure. Oh. Right. Awesome. That's really fun that you did wind up switching instruments. And a lot of people have that story about their high school line, not about the Boston Crusaders. So it's like kind of a cooler version of that story. But
what, the falling over one?
Yeah.
Like you fell over in high school. Not like,
I didn't make my dream section, but you're 15.
You know what? Falling over is falling over. Whether you're in high school or auditioning for a drum corps with older folks that are sitting around you going, get up.
You're earning your stripes.
That's right. That's right.
I
was embarrassed for sure, but it was memorable.
Hey, are you stronger because of it?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I think so.
So you mentioned drum corps kind of transformed your life. I mean, you said you were 15. So prior to that, you hadn't even done wrestling yet, right? I mean, prior.
No, I was wrestling since like first grade, but that's all right.
Got it. Well, I just mean as far as like a difficult experience that's going to rock your world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had done, back in those days, middle school band was mostly concert band, but we marched. We had a marching band in middle school only for Memorial Day and Labor Day weekend. There was a parade that we would do those 2 weekends. And I looked up to the high school band, and I wanted to be in that section. So, I mean, I was in high school marching band for sure.
Yeah.
And to draw a parallel, I mean, I wanted to play tenors when I went to high school. And, back in those days, the number of spots was dictated by how many drums the band owned. And there were 2 sets of tenors, and there was a senior and a junior that had the spot, right? So the percussion director was like, you have a good ear. Because my mom wanted me to be a pianist, and I took piano lessons before I was drumming. So I could match pitch and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so he asked me to play timpani. So in high school, I played timpani. I played in the front ensemble, although we didn't really call it that back then. And
what was it called back then?
A pit.
Oh.
Yeah. Same.
Kind of the same thing.
It was
for sure.
The pit.
Front ensemble sounds better.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
for sure. That's right. And so and these timpani were crank.
Yes.
There were no pedals. I mean, it was like, you had to crank them up and crank them down.
You weren't marching them then, though, were you?
No.
Okay, we're past that.
We were past that.
Yeah.
So, we were past that.
Okay,
yeah.
That's glad to hear. At least your back didn't have to deal with that.
That's right. And then sophomore year through senior, I played tenors.
Sure. I think switching instruments is good for your character building, honestly. Like you get a little bit good at something and you realize that there's a progression you can put yourself on of improvement, but then to like willingly start over on something new, especially for like high school age, like that's it says something good about you when you're willing to start again.
Yeah, well, as I'm talking about it, I'm seeing the value for sure, in what I do now.
Right. Right. And you are a multi-instrumentalist.
That's right.
Many times over as a percussionist and more.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
At that time when you're in high school, did you see that as a crutch of something you didn't want to do? Like, in other words, you wanted to play quads or snare drum or something like that, but they saw a skill in you that would bring value to the program as a whole, and maybe you weren't mature enough then at the time to understand the instructor's purpose of putting you in a position to give the group the experience, right? And put you, but like looking back on that, you're like, yeah, I was a team player and I murdered it. I did really good at that,
Yeah, I mean, and now, so yes, you know, he basically said, you can match pitch and you could really do a lot for this ensemble. And of course, all I heard was, you're getting cut from the drum line. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you get over that.
So what advice would you tell to kids that are going through that experience? Because I went through that. I couldn't play the instrument that I wanted to.
Keep an open mind.
But I was not good enough to be asked to play something else, though.
Well,
that was.
Well, you got to keep an open mind. I mean, it's no different than like at Mars Hill. You know, students come and they tend to want to play the instrument that they played in high school.
Sure, yeah.
And I've got to make that decision. And I tell them up front, I go, listen, I'll evaluate you, audition you, if you will, on the instrument of your choice. But you guys have to trust me that I have to make a decision for the betterment of the group. And I tend to tell that story. You know, I tend to tell them, listen, I understand, you know, because I went through it.
Yeah.
And I tell them, you're here to be a music ed major, right? Or a performance major. Yeah. I said, well, this is actually a great thing. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to learn more instruments and we'll work towards that goal. I said, but I've got, you know, 2 juniors that are better players than you, which is fine. And so, you know, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I do remember in college, even at MTSU, like, you know, just because you're always a good snare drummer, there was, I mean, Lalo always made people play other instruments, especially if they're music education. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And looking back on that, it was like, you know, poor Johnny and Susie didn't get to play the instrument they want, but now they're a killer band director somewhere with this way more versatile than when they came in. And, you know, and to that point, it was taking somebody out of their comfort zone and then making them learn something new, even though they already got the skills to learn something. That's just something new, you know, because a lot of times when you're learning something, it's just a process, right? If you can just take that process that you did to get good at one thing, take the same process, and now you can get good at the next thing and the next thing. And I think if educators took that route more often to take students out of their comfort zone more and put them on a different path, you know, they might appreciate that, you know. Even
if it's a direct decision or it's just an inherent decision for the betterment of the group, and then that's the result, right? Mm-hmm. The result is that you take people out of your comfort zone and you learn. I mean, let's be honest, you learn more skills, and in percussion, that's great. We have a lot of different instruments, right? So, and it broadens your knowledge in our art form, and how could that be a bad thing? I mean, that's great.
Yeah. I think it gives you kind of superpowers that you don't see coming, and you see them in hindsight, but not necessarily in the moment. Like getting put on the bass line, same thing happened to me, freshman, you know, and I was this close to the snare line, but then got put on bass, all that. And then I get to college percussion ensemble years later, and there's like split parts and interlocking music, and you're like, oh, I've got this all day because I did that. That's baseline stuff.
That's right.
You know, same with like choir. I mean, honestly, it was just my best friend in high school being like, hey man, you know, a lot of cute girls in choir. You know, we should probably, you know, well, you know, maybe not the highest of. My dad sang in church choir, so I was like, yeah, why not? And we go over there, but then like it came time to play timpani, and it's like, oh yeah, I can sing a perfect fourth. Oh yeah, I know what intervals are. I know what like relationships. So it was like, you give yourself a chance and have a good attitude. You never know what you'll get out of it.
Absolutely.
You know?
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the more stuff you can find relatable and can cross party lines with things, you know, I think that's the ultimate goal, right?
Absolutely.
As an educator, you want to get them past a certain point and understand more concepts or higher concepts that can match multiple things, you know? And especially when you get to a certain point of familiarity of like pitches, that relates to many things, you know? And one of the things that I wish I would have learned how to do when I was a kid, which is piano, right? Because that probably made everything way easier for you as you went forward.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So
that was key.
Right. And when you look at instruments, like when you, and to also kind of piggyback on when wind players transfer over to percussion, a lot of the ones that do that have the most success are the ones that play the most rhythms. You know what I'm saying? Tuba players don't really make the best percussionists in the end. You know, a lot of times, you know, but the other ones do, where you're like, they're reading the complex rhythms on the woodwinds and stuff like that. They're like, that's an easy transfer over. So for the people that are looking for performers for indoor percussion, that are looking to, you know, borrow from the band program, definitely not steal them for the fall, but if you want to borrow them, just be able to have those performers that already understand that type of complexity. That way, when they go to relate it to a different instrument, like a keyboard or something like that, they already got a leg to stand on, you know? And I think there's a lot of value in that, especially, you know, percussion is one thing. I learned snare drum, then quads, then keyboard or whatever. But when you go from a wind instrument to percussionist, that's a different ball game.
Yeah. So
And the fact that many things were relatable between them makes the transition that much easier, you know?
Agreed. You're reminding me of an experience I had when I was at the University of Oklahoma working on my doctorate, and Bob Shatroma came up to give a clinic, a master class, and just to get right to it, he said, if I'm working with a percussionist on snare drum and I see that he's got finger issues, I give him a bongo lesson. You know, and he elaborated a little bit on that, right? But the idea was that we're going to work on other instruments to develop different skills that you can then apply to what it is that we're working on right now. And I carry that with me, and I do that with my studio for sure.
Yeah, and I think the more tools you have in your tool chest, you know, as an experienced educator that's ran across problems that you've found solutions to fix, it may not be in front of you. It might be, let's learn bongos to fix your snare drum technique, you know. And sometimes you don't have that knowledge unless either somebody told you, right, or you did it on your own and you figured that out. And he's like, well, wait a minute, I can do this, and now it transferred over to here. Oh, great, I'm going to use this on my tools, you know. And I think the more educators that take that experience and can figure out how to transfer that experience from one instrument to the other, that's where people start to really excel, I think, as educators, is when you can start bringing other analogies, other experiences, and how to figure out how to put, you know, something from this bucket into that bucket. Absolutely. And making it an easy transition is pretty awesome, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so we got into a little bit of like your early kind of DNA of what led to the person you've become now, but let's take just like the next step in that about your drum corps, and I also want to ask kind of hand in hand with that about your undergrad, because I know that you were part of some really good cultures. And the reason that I know that, even without you telling one story yet, is because of the number of people who came from the same programs you were in, who have preached that gospel, and it has just become a really wide and awesome tree of knowledge that all kind of goes back to some of the same sources. So I'd love to hear about that.
Sure. All right, so we'll have to go back to Boston. So I marched after the summer of my sophomore year, junior year, and after the summer of my senior year. And at that time, of course, it was time to look for a place to go to college. And I didn't really know, it wasn't like a lot of students, I didn't know what I wanted to do, you know. My parents would ask me, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, I know I like music, you know, and Dad didn't like to hear that, you know.
Yeah, say doctor, say doctor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was the summer of 92, so well, it wasn't really a summer, it was the 92 season, which would have been 91, 92, there was a staff change. And I remember, and I'll just elaborate. I remember as a member, the fact that there was a staff change, we were all our instinct was to be negative about it. I'm just saying, that's the way it was. And because we felt like a sense of loss from the people that had been teaching us prior. And the new staff came in, which was led by Tom Hannum. And I don't know if we had the titles back then, but the person who stood in front of the battery was Todd Morrison, was a cadet. And that program was involved at UMass. Obviously, Tom Hannum had been teaching at UMass for quite a while. And over the course of that season, I started to learn that a lot of the guys I was marching with were actually college students at UMass. And, you know, you spend a season and you're like, I want to hang out with these people. This is cool. I want to go where they go. Mm-hmm. And I remember at a drum corps camp, I found Tom at a lunch break, and I went up to him and I said, you know, I'm a senior and I'm really interested in coming to UMass. And he said, well, we're pretty serious, you know.
For sure.
And I was like, I understand. He's like, all right. So, you know, I applied and went there, and spent the fall there. And let's see, I mean, I was marching with Colin. He was a senior at that time in the tenor line, and I was a freshman. And I mean, there are so many names from that drum line that we could go down, but to get on topic, it was, I started to go through this transformation, and I think I was ready to kind of move on from Boston, or at least there was a move. There was a bunch of us that were talking about going other places. And a bunch of us decided we were going to audition at the Star of Indiana. So, which was quite a long drive. But it was great that it was like power in numbers, right? So, I mean, there was probably 8 to 10 of us at some point cramming into a car or a van or 2 cars or whatever it was. And we went out there. And so I marched, Star 93 under Tom was the caption head then. And that led at the end of that season, the corps director announced that Star wasn't going to continue in drum corps. And of course, what did we do? We were all negative about it, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of, it was like, that was the initial instinct for whatever reason, right? I think because you're younger and you're more focused on not having what it was.
That's right.
And you can't really see the future. You don't have that mindset. But we loved what we went through so much that a lot of us decided to carry on. And so my proper drum corps career, marching ended then, and we started the brass theater phase of things. And that, let's see if I can run that down, that was 94, 95, 96. So we're 4 years at brass theater, and we can unpack that later. And at that time, I was still at UMass. I had graduated with an undergraduate degree in hotel, restaurant, travel administration, because I thought at some point I wanted to own my own restaurant. So I went into that degree, and while I was doing that degree, I was involved in the marching band, of course, and the marimba bands, and the percussion ensemble, and taking lessons. Even though I was a non-music major, I was a BS and a Bachelor of Science. And anyways, at the end of 96, I was graduating with a degree, and Tom Hannum asked me if I wanted to be his tenor tech at the Crossman. And Colin was going, Jim Ancona. There was a bunch of us and we were all, the hub was UMass. And we all left and went there, and that was my first teaching job in drum corps. Yeah, was to be a tenor tech. So I was at the Crossman as the tenor tech, 97, summer of 97, 98, 99. And for whatever reasons, which are not clear to me right now because it was so long ago, the next phase of things was we were moving off to the Glassman, and Colin was getting kind of his first shot at being at the top of that caption. He was the caption head. He was going to be writing the book. It was very logical for all of us to just follow the pack, and that's what we did. And
teams do that. It's pretty awesome.
Well, what's that?
Teams do that,
Yeah.
which is what you kind of have to do.
And I misspoke. Lee Bettis was still writing for the Glassman at that time, and we were coming. And I don't remember. I wasn't part of the conversations about what Colin's role would be, but I mean, he was my superior. And but what ended up happening is I think Colin did some writing that first year, and then Lee moved on. And then 01 and 02, Colin was writing the book, of course. And in and around that time, we were starting to develop, people who were marching under that staff were aging out. And so it was logical to kind of bring them on board. And that kind of pushed me from tenor tech more into like a coordinator position, even though, you could still get in there and teach the different sections. The new blood was coming in and, moving up the food chain, so to speak. And then so that was 01 and 02. And then at the end of that season, we all went to the Magic of Orlando. And we had because the drum corps folded that year. We just had one season there. And then we left and went to the Madison Scouts summer of '04. And as what happens in drum corps, usually finals week or in and around there, I got approached by Jim Coates, who was the corps director at Carolina Crown in those days, and asked me if I wanted to be caption head at Crown. So that was a tough decision because I had such fond memories of the team and being with the team, and it was bittersweet to kind of think like, oh, I'm not going to be a part of that anymore, and it was scary, it was like, what are we getting into here, right? And so...
Because you're starting over in some aspect.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Because you had to build
Decade,
a team,
right?
that you were... Because, I mean, you want to probably keep the same philosophy that you were already kind of doing.
Yeah, I mean, it developed, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you stick to... when
Core.
you teach, you stick to what you do, but over that amount of time, stuff was changing organically, the approach and how we were doing things.
Yeah, but your resources and the team of people you're around is like, there's only one of them, so now you had to go out and find your own people
And
to
that
speak
was
your language.
difficult, right?
Yeah.
Because it was like, I mean, of course, I had to talk to Colin and say, hey, I've got this opportunity. He was like, you should go. And I was like, but I want to teach with all of you guys.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so anyways.
It's like, fly, birdie, go fly.
Yeah, but there was enough people, right? There was enough age outs that, not to say that the pack separated, but there were a few people that came and taught with me who were part of that team. And then, of course, there was a lot of recent age outs from like, Magic and Madison that came and taught with me there.
Yeah.
And so I was there summer of '04, '05. Sorry, summer of '05, '06. And then at that time, my wife and I were trying to have kids, and that happened. And so it made sense for lots of reasons. I didn't continue after the '06 season, and I had my first summer off in
Ever.
a long time.
Yeah.
What did that feel like? Because I know what my first summer off felt like.
It was pretty cool, actually.
Mm-hmm. It's very cool.
I was able to do things that I had never done before because I was committed to the drum corps.
Ever since you were in high school,
Yeah,
you've
pretty
been doing
much.
it. Yeah. It's amazing that rut's the wrong word, but a repeated experience that people get into because they feel like they have to do something. And then the moment that you're not doing it for whatever reason or a circumstance, the sense of like, oh, I can do something else.
And we did.
Right. And that was my experience when I taught drum corps for 15 years. And like the year after regiment, when I had the many summers off, I didn't teach for like 10 years. It's very enjoyable. Yeah. I'll just say that.
I mean, I missed it. Of course. Right?
Of course.
There's
yeah.
an energy around drum corps that.
Absolutely. Like the people that I surround myself with are all still drum corps people because, we're all like-minded folks. Even though I never marched, I very appreciated the system and the idea and the concept of what drum corps does for people. So that was my attraction to it, right? And I know all my friends that did it were all very high-achieving people, more so after they marched drum corps. And I could just really see the relationship and what it is. That was my involvement with it. But again, once I, had my stint of writing and teaching, I thoroughly enjoyed not doing it. I just realized how much nobody really wants to talk about this, but I made 3-4 more times more money without teaching drum corps. And I think that's one of the things that people don't realize, the sacrifices that people make when they do teach drum corps. Nobody's making $1 million, and I can assure you can make way more money not teaching drum corps.
And I did as well.
Yeah,
I made
exactly.
a lot more money to stay home, and teach lessons.
Because drum corps is a thing where like you have to love it and you want to give back to it, and it's not something that. I mean, we all get paid, but it's not what it would be if you didn't do it. You know what I'm saying? So.
Yeah. So after that summer of being off of drum corps. I got a call from a good friend of mine, Jim Ancona, who had gone back to 92 Boston because he was the front ensemble guy there, and he was involved in Star and Brass Theater and at the Crossman. And then he kind of left the team and went to Vanguard, although I don't want to speak for Jim's biography, but That's what I remember in the moment. And then I got a call from Jim, who was at the Cavaliers at that time, and said, "Hey," he's like, "you're not doing anything, right?" And I said, "No." He said, "I'd love to have you, come in for like 2 1-week sessions and run around with the battery and sit with me in ensemble." And I was honored and went that direction. And so the summer of '08, '09, I was fortunate enough to come and be a part of that organization. And Jim Casella was there at that time.
And that's where we crossed paths. And I will vouch that those couple week stints in 2008 were transformative for that percussion section. So we felt the Brian Tinkle effect majorly. Majorly.
Well, I mean, I'm glad to hear that
Yeah.
because I know there were growing pains.
Yes.
Yeah, but sometimes the people that come in the least amount have the opportunity to make the biggest impact. And that's what people don't realize when you have clinicians come in, if they're used right, like they can really move the needle for an organization. And it just has to do with when you're there every day and you listen to the same information. It's all great information, but it can still be redundant. But you have a clinician that comes in and says the exact same thing, but just a different way, a different tone, a different approach. It doesn't matter. Then it's like, oh, well, yeah, of course, then all of a sudden, whoop, the needle moves and things move forward on certain things. And I've always found a lot of value personally with bringing in an extra set of ears, extra staff, extra somebody for shorter periods of time. Somebody like high impact, less stress, like somebody that doesn't have the keys to the program, that's not really stressed with that, but somebody that just comes in and tells you what they think because it doesn't matter to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like they're just coming in, they're showing you what it is, or being honest, and then they get out. What you don't want is a clinician that comes in and say, "Yes, man. Oh yeah, man, this is great. You're doing such a good job."
Yeah, right.
No, I don't want that. Nobody wants that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So, so I'm sure you did bring a lot of value, even though you say I only came in for 2 weeks. I can imagine that 2 weeks is pretty impactful for the.
Well, I mean, it's glad to hear that, right? Because it was a while ago.
Yeah.
So I don't remember all of the specifics, but it must have been felt by others because when there was a move to go into the 2010 season, Eric Johnson had asked me if I wanted to be the caption head, and they were bringing in Michael McIntosh to be the supervisor and write the book, and so things just started moving in that direction. And so I was caption head there summer of 2010 and 11, 12, and 13. And then I departed from that organization.
Some great years there, including a Sanford Award.
Yeah, we
Success.
did some cool stuff. It was
Yeah.
pretty cool. A lot of hard work.
Of course.
Yeah. And honestly, I was in a different role, and so it was a role I had 6 years earlier, but I was older. I was more mature, and it was. I think I learned how to be a better coach during those years because I wasn't so much involved. We had a great tech staff. I mean, they were top notch.
Yep.
And so I was able to. That allowed me to kind of step back and not be too entrenched in that process. I mean, I still got in there, but so I was able to kind of polish or begin to develop those coaching skills.
What kind of advice do you have for students out there that are like maybe at the beginning of their moving up the ranks? Maybe they're a tech now and they've got aspirations to be a caption head and an arranger, supervisor. Like what kind of advice would you give somebody to like pay attention to this kind of thing now, because that's going to be very valuable when you go into the next role, and that kind of thing. Since you've been through like kind of all those situations, what is something you felt an experience that carried over from when you were a tenor tech to when you became a coach that you could then relate back to that tenor tech?
Sure. I mean, off the top of my head, I would say, making sure that you know what your role is, right? Because as you move from one position to the next, what you're in charge of, what your scope, what you're being hired to do inherently changes, right? And so just making sure that you're clear with your supervisor, that you don't have any questions about what your job is, right? Because that's the hard part, right? Is that you're doing one thing and you develop that, and then all of a sudden you get thrust into a different role, which is great. And then you have to kind of live in that world where you're like, oh, am I supposed to worry about this anymore? Or should I be looking at these things? And we all know that, there's the silo thing, like we still move and do different things, even though our job might be this, but just to do a little reflection upon, like, remind yourself daily, if you're on tour, like, what's my job today? Where's my focus? What do I got to do? I think that's a good bit of advice.
Yeah, that's an important balance to strike. The other duties as assigned, where it's like, I'm going to get in where I fit in to make this whole thing go forward, versus, like, here is my house. This is what I have to put a roof on at the end of the night so that I did my job.
Yeah, and I always appreciate that when someone comes to me and says, can you re-clarify my role, And that, I always love to hear that, right? Because, of course, I would hope that I would clarify that for someone who's working as a technician if I'm in a supervisor role. And I try to do those things. But if the other person isn't clear, I'd rather they ask, right? And say, like, can you clear this up for me? What do you want me to do? So I think it works both ways.
Yeah.
So,
but I love the going back to you kind of took us through your whole entire drum corps career, but I was amazed to hear.
There's more.
There is more. Sorry.
Please keep going.
No, it's
that's not your entire. So what's next? What you got?
Sorry.
No, please.
So that around that time we conceived our second child, and so my son was here, and it was time to move on for lots of reasons. And Colin called me up and was like, I hear you're not doing the caption head thing anymore at the Cavs. And I said, that's right. He's like, come to the cadets. I want to bring you in. So that was cool to come full circle, so to speak. And so,
that's interesting. Then what did you take now that you kind of flew on your own for a little bit from when you were partnered up with Colin, and then you did your thing, and then you came back? Like, what type of experiences did you feel like? Because clearly you came back with different added value that you could bring. So, like, what was that different kind of asset that you were bringing back to the table that really helped elevate that program differently than what you felt you were doing before?
So Colin was my supervisor for quite a long time, and you know how that can be sometimes. You start to think that you know more than maybe what you know. And I definitely had an appreciation for the positions that he was in. More
like
so.
After you did it on, a lot of people do that. They're like, I didn't realize all the stuff behind the curtain was going on that I didn't have to worry about. And then now that I do,
I didn't have an appreciation for that. And so we kind of closed the loop on that, right? We had an opportunity to say, sorry for all those years where maybe I was a pain, Sure. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I got to touch those hot stoves myself this time,
I mean, just to put it out there, we were always like brothers for sure. But I had an appreciation for that. And then, at the cadets, there was a starkly different culture in that organization. And I felt like I had, I felt like I was with like company, kind of coming back in, and I was more in alignment with the administrative and the mode of operation of that organization. Was kind of more like what I was used to, coming full circle,
Right.
So it was fun to be involved there. And then, truth be told, there was a long break in drum corps for me after that. My children were at those developing ages. And so it just seemed like the right time to kind of stay focused on family and my other career, if you will. And so from 2015 through current day, I I wasn't involved in drum corps. I got some phone calls, and I was just
Sure.
And my focus was, of course, on my family and on my Marshall studio. I played with the symphony, so I was able to. I didn't have as many conflicts on the weekends, so to speak. In that time, I got hired to be the percussion director for the youth symphony and to build a program there. And so I'm in my 9th year, I think, of that adventure. And now here we are. I got.
And you're coming back in this year, Music City.
Yeah, and I mean, if I can share a funny story, I got a text from Jason Palmer.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. How
Which and that our relationship goes back to when I was at the Glassman, and he was, forgive me, Jason, I think you were auditioning for the tenors along with Nick Phillips, and they were kind of buds, and then if you fast forward to when we were at the Cavaliers, he was doing the body for the drum line and maybe some other things, but at least that's what my mindset was. And so it was kind of interesting to get a text. Of course, I was in the middle of college band camp, so the timing was what it was. And we worked through that, and then I was connected with you, Shane, and we've been navigating that. And so here we are, MCDC 2025.
Yep, and I'm super pumped to have you. I think the drum corps is going to get a banging experience out of it, and because Brian is our percussion captionette and ensemble coordinator, and is going to be there a good bit of the summer.
Yep.
And for me, it's super thankful to know that because I'm writing again, and to know that we've got a killer team and somebody that I trust and I know for a fact because he's already done it few times over.
Yeah, man.
That is going to create an awesome product for the drum corps and myself, and I couldn't be more thankful that you're coming on the team with us.
I'm excited. It's been nothing but great. Everyone's so easy to work with, which is just a blessing. And
that's hard. People, that's worth more money sometimes than what you get paid. You know what I'm saying? And as we get older, we realize that of the value of it, and I think that's why we've been fortunate enough to have like really good people to work with at MCDC because they know it's super good environment to work with, and it's fun. So
I'm looking forward to it. We've assembled a great staff. It's a great design team, and we're going into our camp tonight. The December audition camp starts tonight, and everyone's super pumped. It's the buzz is there, so we're excited.
Oh, it is. We've got over double auditionees than we had last year for the December camp. Like it's going to be banging.
All right,
like it's COVID wrecked a lot of things for a lot of drum corps. So, and kind of where we're at is just taking a second to kind of get our feet back underneath us. But man, we are swinging this year already.
Yep.
On the design side of things, on the recruitment side of things, on the staff side of things, just kind of reinventing ourselves and kind of coming under the gun a little bit with that. And man, it's been a long time since I've been this excited.
Yep.
About like a project that we've been.
I'm really excited to see it too. You guys have had a couple successful years in a row of exciting shows, and the membership and the momentum is all there. And then to get big staff announcements like this, and I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, show's gonna be super killer. I probably should have done an announcement about a week ago because we're already so deep in it. We already know what it is. I just got to get like a T-shirt image up or something.
That's right. Yeah.
That's probably the last step. That's the last step, and bang the gavel on that. But it's good. Super pumped. Talk a little bit about some of your training mindset. So when you're talking, clearly we're talking about on the drum corps level, right? And there's some things that, you bring over from the collegiate mindset, but what are some things that are interesting and unique about drum corps that don't really happen anywhere else because it's such a high intensity, expectant performance, right? That's coming from the performer in such a short amount of time. So there's like a high level of training that goes in such a short amount of like, how do you navigate that while still covering basics and fundamentals, but still getting to that higher end game performance of being able to play certain types of vocabulary and things like that? Because there's, we see the groups that, come out and they're like, they play all the fun lot tunes, right? But then you see them on the field and they're not as clean as what you probably heard in the lot and that cool jams, right? And where do you, now that you're kind of like seeing that from a distance happen over the past 10 years and the lot scene, how are you thinking that's going to relate in the fundamentals and stuff like that? And how do you think we should move forward with some stuff?
Yeah. So the first part of your question, the level of precision in drum corps, I believe, is unlike anything else that I've ever experienced. I mean, I run my percussion ensembles very similar to what I've learned from drum corps, because that's what we're after, is a level of precision. So when we're talking about a product, right? So like,
it's a process.
There's the product, and then you've got to develop skills, like raw skills, right? You've got to develop raw skills, and then you have to develop acute skills to be able to play something perfectly, right? And so I think a good balance between those two things is you need, as a player, right? If we want to turn it into training for people, you need long periods of time where you're playing exercises that are developing your base skills, your chops, your endurance, your raw endurance and skills and whatnot. But then you need to partition some of your practice time to get under the microscope and play like a beat perfectly, and 2 beats and 3 beats and a measure, and develop that part of your training skills, right? I try to tell people that if you have like 2 scales, it's like your raw talent might be like up to whatever, we'll just say 5 out of 10. Your ability to play perfectly is less than that. You know what I mean? Like you need more raw skills, and then you've got to work on how you play certain figures, executing that at a higher level. But if you don't have the raw package of skills, you'll start to peter out there. You know, you can only push that up so far. Even if you're diligent about even if you're very diligent about how you go about practicing something, there's still no substitute for playing a role for an hour. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Like,
you know what I
I'm
mean?
a huge believer in, like, when I was like teaching every day in the classroom, it was like I would try to get the philosophy to the students of like, guys, we're gonna run a 5K at our contest, but every day in rehearsal we're running 10K. And I'm trying to get your chops past a certain point so that when we do this 5K on Saturday, you're doing it in your sleep. You know what I'm saying? And it's that. And the other thing I learned about that is, like, until a student has the muscles to make adjustments to your comments, it doesn't matter. You can talk all this highbrow. It does not matter, because they understand you, but they can't do it because drumming is built around so much of muscle memory and finger dexterity and things like that. And until you can, like, bounce a ping pong ball, adjust your finger, like, to really understand the concept of just like how things bounce, like, there's certain fundamentals that have to happen first, and then you build the chops, right? And then after they got the chops, you're like, okay, let's fine tune that one little thing. And then they've got enough muscles that they can react to that and they can be with you in that moment. Because if not, I don't know, sometimes you beat your head against the wall just trying to get them to a point where they have the raw skills to even make that comment.
Well, I see it at all levels, right? Like, I'll work with a student, middle school, whatever, who's not really played a lot, right? And we might just be playing like some 8s, and I'm seeing like all these problems with them, but I'm just like, let's just
reps,
keep going.
reps.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
less talk, more reps.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And that's what I try to instill in my students when I'm teaching a class on how to teach, right? A methods class or something like that. We talk a lot about, as the teacher, you're going to have all this knowledge, presumably. And when you look at a student, you have to ask yourself, what am I not going to say? Like, what am I going to say anything except do it again? Let's play. Let's just do it again, right? And that happens so much. Someone will play for me and I'll see problems with their hands, their stroke, and all of that. And my instinct is to like jump in there and like give them a manual, like 20 details on things that they need to do. But then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Like, we just need to play.
No, that's a good topic to discuss real quick about pacing of comments. And sometimes when you're letting them rep stuff and you're not making a comment, I think it's good that you let the staff know, or if a snare tech's running a sectional, you want to let the other staff members say, hey, we're going to let this run, because you don't want to necessarily let a lot of ticks go, and the other staff is like, why are they letting that go? Why are they letting this go? So it's like it does seem like something that needs to be communicated with everybody.
I mean, we would have staff meetings and say, like we'd say like, all right, today, like just step back. I want, you're in there, you're paying attention, but like let's have minimal comments and let's let the focus come from one place.
Well, there's also that, and there's also like I like a rule of try not to say a comment about fixing something unless it's wrong multiple times. Right, because people are going to make mistakes, right? I mean, come on. Because that's how you get bogged down, right? But young instructors need to hear that, because every time they hear a tick, they need to make a comment about it. It's like, no, they just need to do it again. And and they'll probably will do it right 2 more times, and they're going to tick the 3rd time. Okay, don't say anything again. Just rep.
You're speaking my language, and I'm thinking about so many situations where I've been the person, like, let's say I'm like running ensemble and I've got a great team of people around me who are all capable of either running the rehearsal. And when I'm thinking back to maybe a memory from like the Cavalier days, and I remember like keeping the mic, you know what I mean? And like everyone we'd run the rep, like, hey, good evening, or good afternoon, we're gonna do blah 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 blah, and then like we run the rep the first time,
and everybody wants to say,
everyone wants to say something. I'm like, no, I'm like, just reset. We got to get back. Like, can we? I was like, I'd look at them and I say, can we do this 4 times
before say anything?
Anyone says anything,
please.
And not to mention names, of course, but not everyone
agrees with that.
Not everyone agreed with that mentality, and that's where some
it can cause some friction.
It can cause some friction, right? Yeah. And so, and I learned, and that happened, and you learn from those experiences, and then you go like, oh, I got to be talking to my colleagues a little bit more about like
the process.
Yeah, we got it.
The philosophy.
Yeah, that's right. You know, and that's why like it takes a while to develop a team, right? Because there's so many aspects to like what we do in drum corps. Like there's not enough time in the day for us to just sit here and talk about how we do everything and how we align that. It takes time, and so I learned that. I mean, Hannum, if I go back to Hannum, I mean, I remember when I was a student, I'm going all the way back to UMass, I was a sophomore, and he saw that I had a knack for like the visual side of things. Like he always saw that I was out like kind of helping people with their dots, and stuff like that. And so I remember one day in rehearsal, he told me to put my drum down, and he said, "Come up here." And I was just a sophomore, and they were a lot older people, juniors and seniors in the line. And he said, "All right, today you're going to learn how to run a rehearsal." And he handed me the bullhorn. Because back in those days.
Right. Yeah.
And I had the bullhorn, and he would sit right here, and he'd be like, "All right, step number 1, teach him how to move fast." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "Tell him to reset." I was like, "Reset." He's like, "Tell him to move quicker, move faster." And it made me uncomfortable. Right?
You're like telling the senior.
Because like I'm telling like this guy, who's 2 years older than me, like to move faster, and I was like, "Oh."
Who just stood over you as you're on the ground to say, "Get up."
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And and if they're watching, hopefully they're getting a laugh out of this. But
Sure.
And then he'd be like, "Give him the directions," and I would tell him. He's like, "No, too many words." He's like, "Say it like this," And then
That's good.
And then I said it like that, and he was like, "Go, tell him to go," and I was like, "Go," And then he's like, "Tell him to move faster," Like it was basically like that over and over. And then we'd get to the end of the rep. He goes, "What are you going to tell him now?" And I said, "I don't know." He goes, "Do it again. Tell him to do it again. Now tell him to move faster." And basically it was just that for like a half an hour.
And then you got beat up afterwards.
Yeah, right.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
That's great.
That's funny.
But I mean that I remember that, and And of course, that's like kind of a crude, raw like example of what that was, but it was.
It's like taking your 4-year-old and throwing him in the deep end and go swim.
Yeah, it was
know,
pretty powerful, and I still to this day adopt by that. It's like we're gonna do the rep, we're gonna do it again, and like we're gonna watch, and we're gonna because like if we talk about like you're going to an audition, I mean people are nervous even though you tell them not to be. They're nervous. It's nerve-wracking. So to just allow everyone just a moment to breathe and play, I
That's
think
a lot.
That's good.
That's really what it is. Because the amount of times that performers get to perform and play their drum without being critiqued is not a lot. Because most kids don't have drums at home. So they're not playing on that surface a lot. So a lot of times when they hit a drum, they're in a performance mode with the instructor, right? So the more time you can give them, like just some time with the sticks in the head to kind of like get in the idea of the level of articulation that's needed to play clean and stuff and kind of dial that in, I think that's invaluable, I mean?
Yeah.
And that's time in a rehearsal. And, when you talk about like building out schedules for rehearsals, like maybe that's part of it sometimes. And you got 10 minutes, first 10 minutes of rehearsal, I want you over there drumming on your own in the corner. I'm not even going to say nothing to you. You're going to go warm up before we warm up.
All right, so I mean, there's that,
Yeah.
right? And before maybe I jump on that, of course, now when you're in a supervisor role, coordinator, whatever it is, I've been that story I told about moving faster or less comments or whatever. I would watch techs who were in my staff, and they would, I'll give an example. Somebody would cut, and then somebody would like stand out in front of the line and would like talk to the drum line for like 2 minutes about and
momentum killer.
And I would just be like, I'd be thinking like, no, like I'm like, and so I would respectfully I wouldn't do it in front of the members, but we would at lunch we'd say, okay, like don't do that. You know what I mean? Like do more reps, say one thing and then fix it. You know what I mean? Like if you see that this person's doing something and you want to make that issue known to everybody, I think that's great, right? Like teach the line, but then go over there and fix in the moment. How quickly can you fix as the teacher? How quickly can you fix what you're commenting on and show everyone how quickly it can be fixed and how to fix it? And then get back out front and then more reps.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Cut. Here we go. Do it again. Here we go. I'm right back over here. Same problem.
Can I give you the information quickly? Can I give you the information fully and thoroughly to where you get it?
Yeah.
And can I get the hell out of there?
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, now you do the same thing with this person over here.
Right.
One-on-one. I think that keeps it fresh. I mean, my perspective is that keeps it fresh for the members. Because it just moves faster, and more playing time.
We made a shirt about it too.
Yeah, I mean, less talk, more rock. Less talk, more reps. I mean, yeah,
All of it. Yeah. Let's move. Just
yeah,
Yeah.
And I mean, if we're gonna have a master class, like if we're gonna like sit them all down in chairs, which is not really my style. Well, especially in drum corps, but like if we're gonna have a master class on a topic, well then let's just call that what it is. I don't want to do that while we're out like they're wearing
inattention.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Like their drum. It's not a perfect science, but it's I think variety, building that in and moving quickly, and I think this gets back to not talking too much as a staff person. Can you fix it with less? Can you be more precise? And then if you're going to say it, fix it. If you can't fix it, don't say it. That's
following up on what you're even bringing up in the first place,
Yeah,
not to just like that's wrong and walk away.
So like I teach in
Yeah.
a methods class, and I'm teaching like a college saxophone player how to, when they become a band director, like how to work with a percussionist, right? And so we'll simulate like an arc.
How to work with animals.
Yeah.
There you go.
We'll simulate an arc, and I'll model up front, like what they need to do, and then I'll point at them and say, now you come up and you work, and I'll stand behind them, kind of like that story I told, and I'll have them run. I'll say, now I want you to run this, and they'll run
Yeah.
it, and then when it's over, I'll look at the person. I'll say, what do you think you should say? And they're like, I have no idea. I don't know what to say. And I'm like, that's okay. Just do it again. You know what I mean? Like just do it again. And and just provide an environment. You're basically organizing an environment for people to play and get through it, right? And then all of a sudden you're going to start to see something. And then you might go, oh yeah, and then, right? Like put it on the students, right? To produce more,
Sure.
And a lot of things fix themselves. I mean, there's
Absolutely.
that too, right?
Yeah.
I
mean, because when you're playing on a pad or your drum by yourself, it's not the same in a large snare line and an ensemble and that kind of thing. And you're hearing things new for the first time than you would be playing individually. So just having that extra value of extra reps for the performers to get warm in their surroundings and hear that impact bass drum 30 yards over there hit after boom and know that that's right. You know what I'm saying? And not have to react to that. I think there's a lot of value in that for them to be able to figure that out, to be, okay, we're locked in. You know what I'm saying? And it's like that type of stuff that they can start to figure out. And it's good stuff.
Yeah, right on.
All right. So for performers getting themselves together for an audition, whether that be drum corps, just college auditions, you've kind of seen it all. What are some good pointers you have? Maybe like, here's what to prioritize, here's not what to prioritize, or not what to give so much of your energy towards.
Sure.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think you have to know the scope of you have to know the scope of what the material is. If it's drum corps, usually it's a packet. If it's an orchestral audition, it's a packet.
Yep.
The biggest advice is be undeniable with your preparation of the material or excerpt. The more prepared you are going into a situation that is admittedly going to be maybe nerve-wracking for people, you can rely on your preparation and kind of channel your mind and have confidence in the fact that you did the work and that you just need to go and show us that. Show us that work. The students who underprepare, obviously from our perspective, that separates the pack, right? I mean, this is drum corps, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad we're talking about this because every year we all get the generic email, which is like, do I need to have this memorized? And it's like, you don't have to, but you also don't have to make the line either. Right. So it's like...
well, I mean, that happened very recently in the... If I may.
But we've all had those emails every year, whether it's you're in college or doing drum corps or whatever. You get the, what's my lowest minimum barrier?
All right,
Do I have to be in there? Like There's
a lot to this. Advice to people: stay focused on the things that you can control.
Yeah.
Okay. So what can you control? I can control if I learn this exercise or not. In modern day society, we've created these avenues via social media to provide students to ask questions. I think there's a strength to that, but there's also the opposite. There's a con to that, a weakness that now students feel like they need to ask questions like, well, do I need to know? Do I need to have this memorized? And like, if I teleport back to when I was their age, I never would have asked that question.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and I didn't have a vehicle to ask that question.
No, write a letter.
You know what I mean? There was no
accessibility changes people's laziness about.
Sure.
Yeah, and I want to be careful, about what I'm on record here for, but to get back to control, focus on, what did I say earlier? It was think about what is in your control. Mm-hmm. And that's what you should be focused on. If you've watched marching band and drum corps, you know that there's a memorized aspect to what we do. You know that there's a precision. You know that you have to follow directions, right? Which means you need to listen.
Yep.
And so, preparation is key. My teachers used to say, make it undeniable. Like, show the people that performing for or auditioning for, that it's undeniable. Like you're going to go with this person because they're coming in and they can do everything. And when you're prepared, when you're not drumming, and this is an increasing problem in modern society, is if you're prepared, you have the ability to listen to whoever's speaking in between. Because you're not sitting there going like...
You're not stressed about the other parts you're not doing right.
Yeah, you're not sitting there going like, oh God, what's this? He's going to...
Right, those rounds, what were those? Right.
Yeah, and I see that all the time, right? I mean, I see that on a daily basis in my studio, right? Like
that they're not fully ears up to you if they're
not
inward instead.
Yeah, I mean, I give them the chunk, right? They know a week in advance. This is what we're going to do on Tuesday. And when they come in, it's like, do they know their job or do they not? And if they don't know their job, they can't follow directions, because it gets back to you can't stop on the fifth measure because you don't know where the fifth measure is. And, and those kinds of things, right? So, to get back to the original question, I mean, preparation is key. You got to have a good attitude. We know this. You've got to be able to listen and follow directions. And I think your ability to do those things successfully all falls back to...
Yeah, I got a good question about when you say undeniable. So if somebody's coming into audition, they may not be at that level where they know what undeniable is. Undeniable for them may be the best where they're at, but it still may not be the bar needed to make the group.
Sure. Well,
I guess what I'm getting at is like maybe that performer needs to know like what an undeniable is for them, and to know that there's other levels past that, and that's why they're there to audition, is to figure out the next thing is. But to kind of piggyback on what you're saying before, is it's more so of come in and do exactly what you know well.
Yeah,
and you want to show them like, hey, I can do these things well, and that way you're not trying to do so many things mediocre.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone's going to come in with a different background and have a different way of playing. Their technique might be a little bit different, but whether you know the exercise or not, I mean, it doesn't matter how you're playing, right? I mean, so to me, that's the biggest, right?
Right.
Like if I've got somebody who can play the packet solid and has a couple little issues with the technique, I'm like, well, we can teach you how to fix.
Tempos aren't all the way up,
sure,
but
we can teach you how to fix that, and that's why you're here. You're here for us to teach you what our technique is.
And also the other thing is, like, during the weekend, the staff is looking at you to see what your bell curve is over those 2 days.
Absolutely, improvement.
So you may be a good player and come in, and your needle may not move nearly as much as the person that came in less than you, and that person might make the line over the better player because that person showed malleability that was able to teach, versus the player that's maybe headstrong and has really good hands or talent may not fit in the group as well because maybe they're not growing as fast as everybody else. And you can see that in a very short period of time. And a lot of players don't understand that the value could be in your ability to learn and get better versus the person you're looking at going, I wish I had hands like them.
Well, I'm all about that. And I think that it all keeps going back to the preparation, right? Because if you're prepared and you know what you're doing, you put yourself in a position to potentially listen and hear what people are saying. And then you're thinking about the adjustment. Mm-hmm. You're thinking about how to adjust and not what the part is, right? And so again, that's why that's paramount for me.
Yeah, you really brought me back with when you said about the people who are kind of tapping out parts and not even being able to be present. And I can distinctly remember from many college ensembles, doesn't matter which one, to be honest, but anytime that you're working on something new and there's like the 3 classes of players, the people who are relaxed because they've got it, they did the work. They're at least ready to do the thing for real. Then there's the people who kind of like halfway got it, and they're going to spend the whole time like, oh, but that one bar, oh, but that one thing, like I didn't fully own it. And then of course, the completely unprepared. Don't even want to talk about that. Let's not waste each other's time. But to be in that first group is a world of difference, and I can picture my college professors' faces, the relief that they would feel when they see everybody coming in like relaxed, shoulders down, ready to throw down and get better together.
Yep.
What do you say to the students that aren't really ready to march drum corps, but they're going to the audition because they want to start the process of learning, to experience it, to kind of like see what's going on. What do you say to those people? Like, what do you think they need to get out of that weekend? If they know they're not going to do it, they're just there to soak it in.
I mean, go and have an open mind and listen and, be excited about the environment that you've put yourself in. And I know that's nerve-wracking.
It is,
for a lot of people. And I mean, I've had many conversations with students, high school students, that say, "Should I go and audition for this?" And
you're like, yes.
even though I know I might not make it, and I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely, you should go." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You should go to multiple experiences so that you can. That's the beginning, right? Like, you don't learn how to swim if you don't hop in the pool.
There's a lot of shots missed because you don't even take them.
If you could go back to your original audition, your first Boston audition, pre-falling on your back, but just go into that mindset of, do you feel like at that point you had, be undeniable, fully presented? Like, that probably wasn't all ingrained quite yet.
No,
that's
but
wisdom that you've gleaned over time.
I didn't use those words. It was maybe confidence.
Yeah.
Demonstrating that you have confidence.
Yeah. Don't be afraid, right?
Even though you might be nervous.
Right.
Right.
That's got to be one of the hardest auditions you ever do, is the first one, right?
Yeah, of course. And we all have learned so much since our first audition, right? But you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And if you're going to start, being prepared is a great place to start.
Right.
What do you say to students who necessarily who they don't know what they're not successful at? Like, if like maybe they're in a marching band and they can't march very well and play, but they don't know that yet until they get there. Like, is there something that they can look at or see beforehand when they get there? Like, what is that self-realization that knows, hey, I can play okay, but maybe I do need to go out and do tracking with my drum on in the yard for more than everybody else?
Or maybe go watch so I'm just hypothetically, if they have the ability to go watch a rehearsal, right? I mean, if there's high school students that are thinking, yeah, I'd really like to march drum corps, and you didn't audition this season, you should be going to watch rehearsal, be around it,
That bug has to get planted in you that people just like me can go on to do stuff just like that. Like, I was very lucky to have one guy in my high school who was even like 5 years older than me. So wasn't right with him, but he made the Cavaliers, and it was like nobody from our high school. But just that was proof that somebody can do it. So it was like, all right, and I think once the other amazing thing I've learned, especially since being here in Nashville and meeting amazing musicians of all different, trades and all that, is you'll meet somebody who, I think you always assume those drum corps auditions, like, oh man, this guy must have been having amazing lessons since he was 10, 9, like he's just gotten at it sooner than me. And that's why I'm not there yet. But now, being older and meeting all these amazing musicians, like, man, there's people who picked up drums after college age who are some of the most ripping drummers in town. There are people who, original instrument wasn't even percussion, and they're going to make the snare line at a Boston, or, there are no rules to what you can and can't do. It's just the time you're willing to give, and like the self-belief to be like, oh, I'm gonna try that. I can do that if they did that,
Or you get out of it what you put into it.
Right.
And being around, put yourself in situations, be around to experience it, either observing, or you go to an audition camp and get to experience it from that side of things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, clearly when people go audition for a drum corps, they've seen that drum corps in a performance mode, maybe in their local town, or they see it finals at DCI or whatever, but they don't always get an opportunity to watch rehearsal for long periods of time to really see where the magic happens, and because that's a certain process, and a lot of people see the end product and go, oh, I want to do that. But they don't necessarily, maybe they don't really want to do that, like what it takes to do that, at the end. And I'm not saying that as a deterrent for people, but, when you're coming into an audition process, it's always good to know what you're auditioning for. You're auditioning for, Saturday night at DCI, but you're also auditioning for those 12-hour days.
Oh, yeah.
During move-ins.
Dog days.
Yeah, so you have to make sure you know what you want, and but a lot of people don't know that. But when they get into it, they're like, I kind of think I needed this, and sometimes those are the best. You just don't know what you're getting into. You just dive into it, and you're like, I'm here, and yeah, funny story.
Well, I didn't know what I was getting. I mean, truth be told, I didn't know what drum corps was. I saw back in those days it was VHS tapes, right? And cassettes, right? It was like I think the first thing I listened to was like a copy of a cassette tape of like some '80s groups. It was like '88 Devs and '88 Cadets and '87 Vanguard and Cadet. Like, I had a cassette of like all those tapes, and I would just sit there and like listen.
Which is pretty sweet. Do you still have that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if it works anymore.
Right.
Yeah. But I had never seen drum corps before auditioning, right? And that's just the way it was. But we live in an age now where
it's super accessible.
It's super accessible, but if all you do is see it on YouTube and you see the shiny penny, you see the end product. I mean, yeah, that is.
Groups have rehearsal videos out there. So I mean, you can absolutely find them, but they're not the full rehearsal. It's like the clinic part of the rehearsal. The part where
I think going to a rehearsal is a invaluable skill if you're so fortunate.
Definitely.
But drum corps in town. I remember when I was in high school, it was like Mama dropped me off at DuPont Middle School.
Yep, you're there
at
all
8
day
in the morning. I know Blue. It was like in '92. I watched Blue Devil was there, and I was like, cool. And I sat there and watched him. I was so sunburned. When I got home, didn't even think about taking water, food, nothing. I was just like, I got my sticks. I'm just sitting there in the stands watching all day. And life changing. It sure was.
Absolutely.
Everything about it. Watching them get up from the gym and walk out from the gym, to like with their water bottles and how they do it, and watching the tech change drum heads. And I mean, like, there's nothing like seeing it live.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely has made a lot of talented people. Talk about some of your experiences in leadership transformation from a student perspective. Like, as if, because we've talked a little bit about in the past on our podcast about how students are sometimes put into positions to where they may or may not be the leader, but they're a center snare. They're the best player. You know what I'm saying? So, you're center snare. How many groups have you taught where you had people that weren't the best player be section leader?
Oh. That I've taught?
And what's your philosophy behind that? Do you feel like the players need to step up and be the leader because they're the best player, they need to be the leader? Or do you find like the kid that's like the natural leader that kind of steps up?
Yeah, I mean that's a tricky question.
Yeah.
I think someone who can lead by example and demonstrate more of the qualities. And it isn't always what you can play, right? I mean, there's other qualities.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm asking is like sometimes
I've had groups where the section leader wasn't the best player. So
yeah, sure, yeah,
that's
and a lot of times the reason I'm saying is because I think as we move into the future and we're out of I'll say the future, but like everything evolves, right? And what I've noticed is the center snare or the center whatever positions, they're just a position in the drum corps with like a role, and the leader is typically, it could be bottom bass, it could be the rack player. If somebody there that's been there long enough that understands the culture of what's needed, how the truck is loaded.
Yeah, so
like that kind of stuff. Like
at the
to
Cavaliers,
me,
there were section leaders, and then there were people who were in charge of some of that other stuff. I don't remember what the titles were, but I mean that exists too, right? Like, to have one person who's in charge of like loading the truck and how we're going to do this. And I think there could be multiple positions.
And how would you get them to work together? Because clearly, like when you're in charge of something, like there has to be a buck stops here, right? It can't be like the team can't be the one in control of something, right? So like what happens when you've got like 5 really talented people in the group and you're trying to get them all to work together to do all the right things. And like, do you find yourself being like, hey, you're the one in charge of making sure everybody's dots are right? You're going to be the one that's in charge of making sure everybody's got notes in their PDFs. You're going to be the one that makes sure the truck gets loaded. You know, I think there's good ways to divide and conquer so the group functions. Because one thing I've learned is like when you're teaching, 'cause a lot of times you don't have multiple staff, but you want to rely on the members to do something. The thing that I've enjoyed is like you give those members those ownership experiences, and that's kind of like the training for life in the future or whatever, because now they got to work with their buddy and be like, yo, quad line, y'all didn't clean the bathrooms this weekend. Now we all have to stay over, you know.
Yeah.
There's that type of friction that sometimes gets put in there.
I think having multiple leadership positions, as long as everybody knows, it kind of gets back to what we talked about earlier. Yeah, you know your role, and hopefully there's someone who is clarifying that. Having meetings and reminding everyone of their role, and you have a meeting before rehearsal, have meetings after rehearsal to maybe, hey, let's follow up on something that happened today, and having that conversation with your leadership team, your member leadership team, so to speak. Because remember, this is all a process, right? Like, you know, when you pick your leaders, they're going to go through a process of how to be better at what you're asking them to do, you know, and to try to help them move forward and through that. I mean, that's somebody's job. Somebody's got to get them together and communicate, and work through stuff. And there'll be issues at times, and then you got to put that on the table and you got to deal with it, you know. But yeah.
How often do you let the students come out and run rehearsal the way that you're talking about, where you did like during college, you have a student come out and they do that because you said you replicated that with your experience, right? When somebody did that with you, so now you do that in your percussion ensemble settings.
So in drum corps, I can't say that I've done that, but like in my studio, I mean, we'll do that, you know, like I might program a chamber piece. And when I say chamber piece, I mean like a quartet. And the idea there is that it's going to be unconducted, right? And I try to always put someone, I announce to the group, this person's leading rehearsal when I'm not here, you know, because I might have two quartets happening at the same time, right? So I can't be. So someone has to be in charge. Of course, built into that is I'm meeting with that person regularly to set them up for success, right? And to narrow the scope for them, or to create an avenue for them to do, right? Sometimes that's what they need, right? They just need a little, you know, this is your path. This is what I want you to do. You know, in drum corps, I mean, we usually have staff people around, you know, to be the leaders there. But I mean, there's other aspects where student leadership can happen. I mean, you know, sometimes we might say, hey, you know, take them over there and work this one lick because, hey, you know, the snare tech's got to change a snare head or something, right? And so your section leader needs to go over and has to.
What do you say to students that are applying to be a leader, to
be a leader?
Yeah, because a lot of schools, like, you know, like sometimes like, oh, he's a senior, she's a senior, she's the section because it's inevitable, she's the only one, or he's the only one. But sometimes you have multiple kids, they're all the same age, and they're like, I want to be the leader. I want to be the leader.
Well, you have to show me, don't tell me.
Exactly.
Right, and that gets back to what we talked about earlier, right?
Every time you're in front of me is an audition.
That's right.
Yeah, and
you need to know
just because that letter you sent me after your junior year doesn't mean squat.
Yeah, you got to be more prepared than anyone else. If you want to, you know, you've got to not talk, you know, and listen and be a role model. Right?
Yeah. And not be in a position just so you can tell somebody else what to do.
Well, of course.
Yeah, but that's what typical section leaders are in high school in that kind of situation, unfortunately. But
well, hopefully we can start to break that down.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me just
because it's not really about. It shouldn't be about I mean, I don't think about that in my position.
No,
you
most
know,
people
like,
don't, but
I
that-
don't think that I'm excited to tell you what to do. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
you know, I'm excited to
No,
collaborate.
but there are high school kids out there that like
Of course.
that's their motivation. But I'm just saying, as a barrier, as an instructor for the young instructors that are watching, you have multiple kids that want to be section leaders. Like
Yeah.
like what is that process, and how do you trim the fat and find the one that's like the right one? And they might not even be the center snare. You know what I'm saying? They might be something else. And like, how do you kind of develop a culture where like that is a thing? Because like at Mystique, several years where the center snare was not the section leader. It was somebody else in the ensemble. It could have been the cymbal tech that's been there for 7 years or something. You know, not cymbal tech, but a cymbal player.
Yeah, it's rare that, at least from my experience, sometimes somebody doesn't rise to that occasion, and you've got to kind of scrutinize that. But it does get back to, you know, be the role model, and then sometimes I'll interview them and then give a scenario and say like, all right, so here's the scenario. How are you going to deal with it? You know, how would you go about?
That's that. I like that. Where you're going with this. What I've noticed at some schools is like, submit a survey. Give us. Are you going to do a section leaders? Write us a letter telling us why. So if you're in that kind of position, and I like where you're going with this, where you started the interview and you give them scenarios and how you would do that. So if you're in a position where you're not doing interviews and you're requesting or asking them to give you letters, is there like maybe 3 questions that you have everybody answer? That way it's not just a free-for-all, like, I want to be a section leader because blah, 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 blah. I was in middle school and this is my rite of passage, and, you know, whatever that is. Like, what are those 3 questions that you would ask the band director to ask the student?
I've got them written down on my computer somewhere. No, I mean, you know, why do you want to be the section leader?
Sure, yeah.
What experiences do you have that you feel are strengths to that position? What do you think? What does it mean to be a section leader? I mean, that would be maybe the second question. You know, why do you want to be? What does it mean to be a section leader?
Mm-hmm.
How do you ask them? How do you see your role?
Yeah.
What experiences do you possess that think that
You're
if you
fit
think
for-
that
yeah.
you would be fit for this job? I mean, that would probably be the 3 questions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had to think about this, and you know
And
what I mean?
none of it has to do with playing.
Correct.
Those questions.
Yeah,
those
correct.
questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. And no, that's good to know.
There's
I
an
mean,
important interpersonal part of being the section leader as well. Like, you need to have the buy-in of all the people who are looking up to you. You need to have the inherent authority by being a role model and by how you carry yourself and act. And, you know, that allows you to do good work in that role. Otherwise, it's like you have a low credibility, unreliable person who's been here for a bunch of years. Like, I don't know if that's everyone that's going to rally behind them,
Yeah.
you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
what have you noticed in leadership change from when you marched to kind of what's going on now? Because we're talking decades, right? I mean, a lot of things can happen.
Is
in
that,
Well, I mean, when I was-
instructor or section leader? Just
I think section
because-
leader,
okay.
section leader.
Okay, I mean, I've never answered this question before, so I am thinking on my feet here, which is all good. But I mean, my perception, if I go back to Boston, I mean, the section leaders ran the rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes on Friday nights there was no staff. You know what I mean? It was like the section that would be like, the truck's open, we found the keys.
Yeah.
Come and get the trucks. And then we'd go, and then the section leader would step out and say, now we're doing this. And then they would do that and they'd cut, right? And so, I mean, that's an answer to your question, right? Now we've got a lot more people out in front that are kind of facilitating some of those
I'll say,
skills. So
but
that's one.
my
big
experience
change.
also when I was in Mystique, I did the same thing. It was like section leader. We ran sectionals all the time by ourselves because we were by ourselves. We drummed a lot during the week.
Yeah.
Put it that way. And you're right. I guess nowadays there's always an adult more so in front of him than what it was then, which is probably the biggest difference that I'm thinking about now.
I mean, I think that is,
You know.
Our guys and girls still have Wednesday night or, whatever night
Oh,
of the
they got a
week.
lot
of
of
course,
autonomy
they're
to
doing
do the
it.
thing.
But yeah.
They're not.
At rehearsal, though,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah,
pretty
nobody's
prescribed
hovering
by
over
the
them all the
staff.
time, yeah. But I think there's a lot of value in that to give the performers that time away from staff for them to be able to be like, this is my thing.
Yep.
That's when the ownership starts to happen, I think.
I agree, and we'll look to build that
Love that.
MCDC for sure.
I've got
Finding opportunities. I'm sorry.
Oh no.
Finding opportunities for them to grow in our absence.
Hey guys, coffee break. We gotta go to Starbucks for an hour. Snares take it.
Right. Yeah. So this sparked a question in me. I think of you in a general way. One attribute I would give you is you're the man with the plan. You are very, very good at planning, and all the people you work with seem to think so. So give us just a little bit of a taste of how, and this is, again, for all of the band directors watching, for all of the techs who are working their way up through their journey and maybe starting to, okay, I was the quad tech for a couple years and I just had to worry about my house, but now I'm starting to grow and I need to be able to have that chop of thinking from 30,000 feet, planning, and then working with others, right? So give us a little taste of how that looks to you.
Well, thinking with the end in mind is, I guess, the first thing that I think about. And then that leads to developing long-range goals. And then that leads to, short-term goals. And then that leads to the schedule, I'm a planner for sure, but that doesn't mean I always stick to the script. Mm-hmm. You are who you are, right? Through the experiences that you've had, the teachers, the mentors. And I remember in those early years, long before cell phones and things, we all had a book, and the people running, the person in charge would write a schedule, and then we'd all have to dictate the schedule, write the schedule. And we would allot times for certain things, and always in pencil, because you might get through it and go, we need less time on each thing, or hey, we need more time on this. Now we can't do these three things. And I think the fact that any teacher or band director would I pride myself in doing a lot of thinking before the rehearsal for the betterment of being efficient for the staff and for the members, right? I mean, they're out there working hard, right? So let's not waste their time, that's what it's come to for me, is that I want to do all that.
It's a mutual respect thing.
Right? Yeah, I want to do all that planning so that I might not get it right, you know what I mean? I might plan something and it wasn't the right thing, but at least I gave it a go, you know what I mean? And I say this might be in the same line of your question, but I'll say this to people that I mentor now. I'm like, we're all going to write our schedules. If I say, and I'll say that to the tech staff this weekend, now that you've had Friday night, show me what you want to do for the Saturday morning block, or I'm just giving an example.
Yep.
And so I'll be watching to see how that goes, right? So that's one example. Or if I'm writing the schedule and I pass it out to the staff and I say, here's the schedule. I want you to stick to the schedule because we're all going off into different zones. And if you only get halfway through the schedule and you get all the way through it, when we go to ensemble, it's not going to work the way that it needs to happen. Yep. So that's a scenario. Mm-hmm. But then I also build it in that sometimes I try not to create that scenario so that I can say, well, here's your schedule, but I want you to fix things. So if I gave you 10 minutes, I'm using numbers. If I allotted you 10 minutes to fix that snare lick in the opener and it takes you 30, as long as you come back and say, I fixed it.
Right.
Then we're good, right? But I have to plan to know that then that ensemble rehearsal, right?
One thing's not going to happen because we did do this.
Yeah, and that gets back to think with the end in mind, right? It's if you know that you want to be totally coordinated in full ensemble in the last block of the day, and then that leads to well, let's make sure that we coordinate the captions to make sure that they hit those things with their staff so that when we get to ensemble, it all comes together. And then that goes back to subs, right? And if the subs, right? So like not every day has to be that way, right? But there'll be days where that's how it should be. You know, it's like we know this is the focus, and so now let's work backwards.
Yep.
And you have a staff, right? So I'm a big fan of like spending more times in subs so that the teachers can teach and can get more specific with the individuals, right? I'm a big, like to me, drum corps, yes, we look at the group, but if somebody was to say how much emphasis do you put on the individual versus the line or versus I would answer always the individual, more focus on the individual.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
like because the
better ingredients, better pizza.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. I mean,
we know a pizza
it's just true,
analogy,
right?
So-
I mean, you know, when people say like, "Well, how did you get that line to play so clean?" It's like I worked with everyone. Or how did you fix that one measure? I worked with everyone individually for 30 seconds and figured out exactly what they were doing wrong. First left hand was too early.
Yep.
You know, like, and if you can go down the line and fix that, and then have them all do it together, and then all of a sudden, like they start to like hear it. You know, what I
Then
mean?
they can hear the individual three people over making a mistake.
Yeah.
Because if they're all doing the same thing, it's like it's just dirty.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that
You
I know
know.
we kind of organically slipped off
Yeah.
of the
No,
original
no,
question.
this is
but-
gold. I'm going to break the fourth wall. This is gold. This is why people love him, because gives a lot of time and care to planning before the rehearsal, treats having a plan and using people's time as a way to show respect, right? And then delivers results, makes sure that we're shipping results here, people, not just spending time, right? This is why people love him.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
Sure. That's why I'm super pumped. Ring Tangle the group this summer.
What was that?
Super pumped.
Super pumped.
Yeah, that's right. Super
We're
pumped.
pumped, man.
'Cause you're
We're
going to
pumped.
ring tangle
Yes.
the group
Yeah,
this
I mean,
summer, so.
you know, we'd have staff meetings leading into the camps, right? And we had a couple, and here I am on these conference calls. Everyone's on mute. You know, it's kind of weird. You know, and I'm like, listen, guys, we don't have enough time in the day to talk about like how we're gonna do this and how we're gonna do that. Like, but it's gonna happen. You know what I mean? Like, we're gonna come together. Everyone's got experiences and strengths. I'm looking forward to observing what our techs are going to bring to the table. I'm looking forward to having conversations about that. I'm looking forward to learning some new things, you know, like because I'm working with people that I've not worked with before, and that's exciting.
Right.
You know, there's unknowns, sure, but we all know how to be great, and we just need to kind of get on the same page, and we will, and we'll move ahead.
Mm-hmm. What's your most favorite thing about drumline and percussion? Just the education part of it. Like, what's your favorite thing about all of it?
About drumline.
Drumline, yeah. For an ensemble, just percussion section, drum corps, band, that type thing.
But drum corps.
Yeah, drum corps, yeah.
I mean, to me, it's when you can get everybody to think about the same thing at the same time. That's cool.
There's a certain amount of energy that's palpable when you see that many people dialed in on one specific thing, where there's like no room for error. There's really nothing else out there like that.
Well, and the energy. I mean, that
Yeah.
was the next thing I was going to say is the energy that young people demonstrate that they do in drum corps is unlike a lot of things. You know, I mean, we are Olympians for the marching arts, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, no, it's definitely the higher end of things for sure.
So to answer your question, the energy and the precision.
You like the process or you like the performance?
I like the process.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I like both. But
I love the
I'll be honest,
performance
like-
makes me so nervous
Yeah.
in a way to where, like, you know, for WGI on and off the floor, can't stand it. Like it's like the most nerve-wracking thing on the planet because, but there's a lot of prep that goes in that for us. So I'm not really super nervous about it, but anything can go wrong.
So it's definitely process. And I'm thinking back, like when I get into finals week, like it's always like bittersweet, right? Because it's like you're getting these young people to hopefully, if you do it right, to culminate and be the best that they can be. And it doesn't always happen. You know what I mean? Like you strive for that last performance but sometimes it happens and it's amazing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you fall short, but I'm always a little disappointed that we're not going to wake up on Sunday and get back to the
after finals.
And get back to the process. So, the finals performance is always very bittersweet because of that.
Nobody's mixing the Gatorade in the morning. It's come on, man. Nobody's. Yeah.
So,
you don't have the guy with the arm in the Gatorade.
Right.
Just regular.
That was my job at Cavaliers.
I'm sure.
No, I mean I've experienced that.
Yeah.
Someone mixing the Gatorade with their arm. I've had some of that Gatorade.
Well, I've got maybe one more really good question for us to maybe wrap things up with. Shane, if you've got another good one,
maybe we'll see.
All right. Well,
it could be endless, but we can talk about.
So this is going to be just a little bit outside of just marching because I love that you are somebody who embraces the total picture of music from the orchestral side to you have a youth orchestra. You play in small chamber ensembles. You gig still as well. So you're like a very, in my eyes, like you keep it healthy the whole way around as a musical person. And I think that's really important. I've always loved the analogy that like a bird's nest, there's one parent who sits on the eggs at a time and then the other one flies out and gets twigs and brings them back. It makes, what you fly away from the project and then bring back is what can bring value. So I love that you have so many different things you fly away to. How do you just kind of view now, at this point in your life, the interconnectedness of all these different arts and maybe just some cool examples from your life of the ways things can interconnect like that?
Well, I mean, there's consistency to a lot of the things that I do, it all stems back. It's interesting how my experience in drum corps has infused, as a member and as a staff person, developing a way, how that's infused how I practice and prepare for my orchestral gig that I have on a certain week or whatever, or how I run my studio or how I teach a lesson, there's commonality to a lot of those things. And honestly, a lot of that stems from my experiences in drum corps.
So do you feel like the drum corps is actually feeding, like your experience?
Well, it goes both ways. I was just about to give another example. Like when I started to play like keyboard, when I started to play more marimba, when I played snare drum, I started to think like, I'll just say it, like I started to like think more melody when I was playing snare drum.
Yeah.
While I was playing, and that led to like shaping and allowing me to demonstrate. Because in the days it was like, well, you're here or you're here, and and it's got to be perfect, and it's got to be perfect, and we just want it to, and we all know that the activity has moved a little bit away from that, and there's micro phrasing and all that. But for me personally, it was interesting how when I started to practice more marimba, how I started to see how it affected how I'd play snare drum. So there's consistency amongst those things. I hope I'm tapping into to what you were asking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then what about, even on like I think most of our audience are probably people involved in the marching idiom. So maybe you could speak to things that you bring back into marching from, like, if you never gave yourself a chance to go play gigs in front of people in a small setting where they're just watching, you and your wife, one other person in your combined group, like that is a whole different part of the brain maybe than being in a drum corps rehearsal in a marching band setting. So
Well, I think that from my, I think back to like when I marched, we weren't told to look at the audience and engage. It was
You were
like
told not to. Yeah, because
Right.
it was
The
like
head.
it was like the
Yeah.
head was on and you looked straight ahead and it was.
you executed.
Yeah, and that was cool. And that was cool. What struck me when I went to finals last year, like a smack in the face, was like now like you see more individual.
yeah.
It's still there's still an organized aspect to it, of course, to the highest level. But I was like recognizing like individuals when I was watching the activity in a way that I didn't remember.
Well, that's how WGI has influenced. Clearly, the uniforms. There's no more traditional
Yeah.
uniforms. There's choreography everywhere now. There's electronics and certain type of things.
Well, the brass theater thing, that happened as well, and I was going to talk about that.
Oh yeah, please.
No, earlier was that, like, that was one of the things that was difficult for us was that when we got thrust into that environment,
you didn't have shekels on anymore.
we didn't have shakos on anymore, and the people teaching us had never. Well, some of the people that came in to work with us maybe.
They didn't understand that added element that was needed, kind of thing at the moment.
Yeah, or they wanted us to like have an individual performance aspect, and we were all like, well, I don't know how to do that. You know what I mean? Like I just know how to like do this thing, right? And so from my perspective, I started to have that transformation like in '94, and I can't remember where WGI was at that time.
About that same time.
In that timeline.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that I wrote for a WGI group with Jim Ancona, and so I was in that environment for a short period, and I remember looking at WGI and trying to compare it to drum corps, and in those days, I saw a stark difference, kind of opposite of what I just said. Like it was well, this is everyone's got to look the same and kind of do it the same way, and here there's a little bit more
Freedom.
an individual expression, freedom. But now, like when I went to finals last year, there's still coordination and there's still precision and there's still you're doing it the same way. But there are moments when everyone just gets to be, a performer, and it's pretty cool.
It's really fun.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
I bet it's fun for members.
Yeah.
Comparatively.
And fun to watch. I mean, but I can easily put on, Spirit 87, and it's just like, or Cadets 87. You know what I mean? And like, I'm super excited about that. Like, it's definitely two different times and two different approaches, but yeah.
Well, that's important to talk about. Is you have to know your context. Like if you're going to form an opinion, right? You got to make sure that you understand the context, right? And so, better to just accept and see what. Better to look at it and go like, wow, that was cool for what that was and what they were doing. You know what I mean? And everyone was committed to the way that it was supposed to be, right?
That's interesting. Like funny story since you're sitting here. I saw drum corps at, I guess it was Mid-South at Vanderbilt 93 when they used to have the thing there. And I saw Cadets and Star and all these groups. And during that day, I went out to go, was lucky enough to go watch some groups rehearse. But I didn't really understand or appreciate what Star was doing at the time.
Most people didn't.
Right. But what I'm saying is, like, I fell asleep during the performance, but Cadets 93 was my jam,
I've heard this many times.
Yeah, and but later, it's like 2 or 3 years later in college, I started to realize, okay, a different appreciation for what Star did for the activity in the short time that they were around, and so that's a flash in the pan nowadays, and the success that they had in that short amount of time. What do you think was the catalyst for that? I have a theory
catalyst for?
Well, clearly you had killer staff. You know what I'm saying? Well, the success the drum corps had in a short amount of time. There's drum corps that have been around now for 20 years that have never made finals.
I mean, remember my perspective now. I mean, 1993, right? This is a long time ago, and I was a lot younger. And so I think different people would be able to answer this a different way. But I remember some of the visual aspect of what we were doing
was different.
Different and uncharted from my perspective.
And
I remember...
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember like 84, 85 cadets were really... That's when things I felt like switched, right?
Well, I'm just referring to like some of the body and some of the dance, the dance aspect that I'm going to just call it that, right?
Yeah.
The dance aspect that was infused in that show. Philip Burton, at least my memory, was that he had a lot to do with that vision. And I don't have his bio, memorized, but his experiences. My memory is that his experience were more outside of what drum corps was, and I think that helped. That I think
Sure.
right. Like
no,
I was just a
absolutely.
member, right?
Yeah,
so I wasn't sitting around the design table.
Well, y'all definitely had a different flavor than everybody else. You could tell that it was a unique experience that wasn't. It was still drum corps, but it was like somebody was coming in and was like, "But I want to do this kind of drum corps," And that's what the activity needs is like disruptors, people that come in and just shake things up. And whether or not they last forever is irrelevant.
We
were when you make your mark on, absolutely.
We were booed at pretty much.
You know why? Because you were the new kids on the block and you were doing something different. You had a mohawk, you know what I'm saying, and everybody else didn't, and they didn't want to do it, and everybody's boo-booing about it, whatever.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah, but I remember when I was in high school, I had some friends that were auditioning, and at the time. And the reason I'm saying I have my theory is because I come from a place of ignorance on this, except for my experience. And I remember the dues of drum corps at the time being around like $700. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I remember stars being like around 350 or 400, and they were significantly cheaper than the other people. And I was thinking, man, I remember thinking this as a junior in high school, going, they did something to where they lowered the fees, and now they could headhunt the best players. Because now people, they want to have the best players. They're going to pay the least amount of money to come and do it. They're going to get a great experience with the staff and all that. I
think my fees were $350.
Yeah.
$500.
That's a payment nowadays.
Well, I know. I am aware.
Yeah. Well, it costs what it costs. I don't want to get into that.
Well, and that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's more stuff out there.
Oh, yeah.
There's the props alone, and now you need another truck. And
the extra buses, the extra gas.
Well, to be clear, the budget expenses is gas, travel, food.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with electronics, because it's a whole big thing, because people get on the internet.
Gas for sure.
Gas is the big thing, and the reason I want to squash it.
But if there's another truck.
Well, dude, you've got... remember when the caravans were like... Equipment truck,
4 or 5 coaches, because they were. My memory is that they were smaller. All the corps directors know, but the buses had less seats in it.
Sure,
4 or 5 buses and 1 equipment truck and maybe a food truck.
Yeah, dude, there's caravans out there now with like 18 vehicles in it.
Yeah, and it might have been a lead van, right? Like a lead van.
Yeah, so when those expenses start to go up, you're talking about travel. It ain't electronics, it ain't staff. It ain't whatever. It's the travel and the amenities, whatever that comes with in drum corps, is kind of what that happens. But back in the day, there was not a lot of amenities on that end.
Yeah, when I first started marching Boston, when we stayed with friends.
Hang on, and when I say amenities, very lightly,
we didn't.
It's still drum corps. So.
We had like a place to rehearse, and then we went and stayed with friends, like at their house and stuff. Like there wasn't. And I don't know the inner workings of what it was. It was like a warehouse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was like where we'd have camp.
But did you recognize at the time that y'all's dues were less than everybody else?
Are you now talking about at Star?
Yes.
I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah.
I got to be honest. That wasn't.
Coming from Boston,
did you march there just one year?
I didn't have a way to know what other people's dues were.
Oh, sure.
I
Yeah,
mean,
no internet.
I mean, you got a letter.
yeah.
You got
Well,
a
the
letter
reason
that said
is-
this is what you owe, and you went to mom and dad and said, "Yo, this is what it's going to
Well,
cost."
the reason why I knew that is because in high school, I went to Mount Juliet. I had 5 friends, and one went to Madison, one went to Star, one. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
everybody,
we didn't-
right? But
yeah.
I'm saying when they all came back, they're like, "Oh, my dues were this, mine are this, mine are this, my audition experiences like this," and it got down to
There was no way to research that
Oh,
when
yeah.
I was at that age, right?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah,
It wasn't
yeah.
in the manila envelope that you got with your packet. It didn't have like other courses. It's just, yeah.
But was it cheaper than Boston
I can't remember.
at the time? Yeah,
Yeah, Chris Holland will be able to tell us.
sure.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I have a memory that my dues at Star were a little cheaper than my dues at Boston.
Right,
But that gets into other things, right?
oh yeah, there's a reason why that is.
Yeah,
You know, I get that, but like there's but it just makes me think when like people are trying to get like dues down, like there's a reason why those dues are down at Star. You know, I'm like, what can drum corps do to bring the dues down? Because once you do that, then you do open the door for you can cast a wider net.
There's a relationship there.
Yeah,
Cast a
you can
wider
cast a
net.
wider
Sure.
net for talent and things like that versus like going for people who can only afford this, you know, and then now you're really have even slimmer pickings on things, you know. So I don't know. I mean, I definitely want to make drum corps for everybody, but it's not. But it's like if you can at least cast a bigger net and make it a little more inviting, it makes it a little more tolerable, you know. But
I mean, it's unfortunate that the financial part of it is a deterrent, probably for so many who want to participate.
So one more thing before we get off here. Technology and teaching. How have you seen that change from when you started to where it's at now? What would you like to see happen in the future to make the jobs easier? You know,
Well, I don't know if I can answer that second part yet,
Long Ranger?
but what's
I mean, like the use of a Long Ranger and metronome.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
talk
Well,
about that.
let's see. So, what has changed? That was the first part of your question, right?
Yeah. Well, what is technology-wise, like what has changed?
Well, I mean, I think back to, I have memories where on Friday night we would show up and we were given, the opener or the exercise. And then Friday, and because
There was no email to send out in advance. You
you weren't getting anything
There's
in
no
advance.
mailing list.
And it's handwritten from Tom anyway. It's not like it was even
in that one example.
Right.
It would have been, or like we got like Collins Cadence that was handwritten, and
Yep.
we'd get it. And Friday nights tended to be, people were coming in, and I don't want to say it wasn't a wash, but it was. We might have just been built in. It was subs, right? Because you didn't have everybody, and so it was just like, how quickly can we learn this? Because tomorrow, like we're
getting after
getting after
Yeah.
it, and the expectation is going to be that you should know it,
right.
and we just got it like
Definitely.
the night before, right?
Definitely.
And sometimes we were better at that than others. So to answer your question, the ability to be able to send out the material, show the material,
The accessibility right now.
that is, I mean, I was so blown away with the level of performance from last summer, right? Because when you're away for a while, right? Like, I was away for a while. I came back and I was smiling. I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing, And I remember I was sitting next to Tom and he was like, isn't it amazing? He goes, and they do all this with less camps and less time on tour than we used to, And I was like,
And it has to do because of all the technology, the in-between camps, communication, the lessons,
we're not, the video lessons.
Yeah, man, it's
and kids,
it's endless,
students,
yeah.
I say kids, forgive me, but young people, just the ability to, post what they're doing and get some feedback. I mean,
So we agree things move way faster nowadays than in a much more condensed amount of time. We can get way more stuff done, way more efficient. But all the people who really had the fundamentals of like what it was like to be in drum corps, to get your music on a Friday night, to crank through, like, looking back on the people that have been successful in drum corps teaching are a lot of people from your class, you know what I'm saying? Like in that era that like just had those raw moments that they had to like, now technology comes like, well, I already got these fundamentals. That just makes my job even easier. now.
Right.
Like
when you're tapping into
Yeah.
a good areas that there's, this is a skill set, right? It's like I make this joke with my students. I say like Google's not going to help you learn your snare etude. You know what I mean? Or I'll make like a joke like that, whether they think it's funny or not. I don't know. but my point is that there's no substitution, right? For you still have to do the hard work, right? And this gets back to, we mentioned this earlier in the interview, is just because you have a vehicle to ask questions, maybe think about it before you do it, right? Like, and think about those things and do more on yourself and less like, well, tell me what to do. You know what I mean? Like, right? Like just do you come in and like show me what you have.
There's no substitute for just the you talked about again in the very beginning, raw skills that can be developed into acute skills. And even though it was great to see good examples ahead of me and all that kind of stuff, nothing got me over the hump other than standing in a concrete room with my drum and with time. And a mirror with headphones, without headphones, with video. And again, even that was new, just being able to video myself, watch it, get a friend in the room. Can I make it through these 32 bars I just learned with you watching me? That kind of stuff is like, you don't need technology to do any of that.
Yeah, sometimes if you don't do it right, that can slow your progress down.
Yep.
Right, if you're spending more time like questioning, it's like you should just be drumming. You know? Like if you're fiddling with a camera for too long, you're just
or even
get after the fundamentals.
I mean, I've definitely experienced times when, not all the time, but times when we would assign video assignments for our group to work on during the week, and you see that video assignment go up, but then the kid shows up or the young adult shows up on Friday night and Saturday the next week, and it's like, I don't know if you got any better in the last week at all. Like maybe that's all they did, because it was like, oh, to make my instructor happy, I just have to post this video on Wednesday, and like I did it. Where it's like, no, like that is supposed to be a snapshot at all the great work you're doing, right?
I think that's what we're supposed to pass along to the younger generation, right? And hopefully the right way, right.
To not rely on the technology to do all the work, but there's still like a fundamental. You got to do it.
You got to do the work.
You just got to do it.
You gotta put in the time.
Maybe it is put the metronome away, put the video away, put yourself in a practice room with a drum, and just, it is what it is.
Yeah. Work is work, and not work is not work.
Correct.
That's true. That's true. I say that every day. I look at my emails piling up.
All right, so I've got a fun little lightning round, couple questions to take us out on, because I want future guests to think that this is fun, and so we're going to end with a fun lightning round of questions. Okay,
hold on.
So, favorite percussion method book, just rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
Everyone must own.
God, there's so many. Stick Control.
Love it. Great answer.
Book of Syncopation.
George Lawrence Stoll. Yeah,
or Ted Reed. I mean, there's so many.
Yeah.
I can't believe it didn't come out faster.
Those are certainly great answers. Jazz album everybody should take a listen to.
Herbie. How about like Herbie Hancock 60 Sessions?
Yes.
It's a compilation of
Love that.
multiple takes of the same song in some cases. I'll have to bust that out.
Perhaps historically underrated, but dear to your heart, drum corps show. Or not underrated, but what's one that's like you keep pretty special to you? Got to listen to it.
Well, I mean, it was because of the cassette tape that I referred to. 87, 88 Cadets and Blue Devils. And 87, 88 Vanguard.
87 Cadets. Love
87
that.
Cadets.
Yeah.
I mean, I like 88 too, but but yeah, I'd say 87 Cadets, 87 Vanguard, Blue Devils, right there, right in that pocket.
Every drum corps show we've mentioned in the entire episode today is worthy of mention because pretty much everything Brian's been involved in has been fantastic. So you should look up every single one of those, but on the record, you got to look up those shows in particular.
For sure.
All right, favorite summer Olympic sport?
Curling.
It's changed this past whenever we had the last Summer Olympics.
Yep.
I was drawn to the running, the track, just the racing, just watching these people just.
Man, there was some really killer races.
The races
was 100-yard. Was it 1,000-yard dash?
Well, don't even ask me.
Yeah,
that, but
they dash.
I
They
will
do
say
dash.
that I really like the watching because like you're not evaluating like a tech. Who crosses the line
Yep.
first. You know what I mean? And so yeah, there's technique built in how quickly you get off the
Right.
off the start, but just watching the raw energy.
But we don't know that. Like, we're like,
Yeah.
did you win or not? You know.
Well, I mean,
Right.
just watching these people, like,
Yep.
that was Olympians. Forgive me.
Love that. Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, Winter Olympics.
Snowboarding.
Great answer.
Tube. Yeah.
Yep, great answer.
And I mean, I spent a lot of time in Vermont. I mean, I grew up in Connecticut, and I was at UMass, and so Stratton would always host like a preliminary, World Open or whatever, and we'd always go there and watch these guys come down and just tear up the half pipe. Pretty impressive.
Yes. All right, last one. Mars Hill University is located in.
Mars Hill, North Carolina, north of Asheville, North Carolina.
And when people come to check out campus and to visit you and to say hi and spend some time in the beautiful mountains, what's one restaurant everybody should try in Mars Hill, North Carolina?
I would say Papa Nick's or the movie theater kind of brewery situation.
The movie
that
tavern
sounds
kind of
fun.
jam.
Yeah.
Is that one of those things where they serve you while you're watching the movie, that kind of thing? Or?
It's an old movie theater that's been made into like a brewery restaurant type of situation.
Does it have like a movie?
Mars Hill's
playing in
pretty
the
small.
background?
So I'd say in Asheville, I mean, there's so many. White Labs, there's Mela, the Indian restaurant, or Bouchon, the French restaurant.
Yep, I love Asheville so much. I went last December, a year ago. I know they just went through that horrible flooding this year with a lot of damage to the community. So I'm excited to get back and give them some tourism and
Yep, we need it.
support the rebuild. Everybody go check out Asheville. Visit Dr. Brian Tinkle at Mars Hill University while you're there. And I just want to thank you again so much for taking the time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate
Yep.
it.
Spend a lot more time together.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Really great. And everybody, keep your eyes out for Music City Drum Corps this summer. Going to have an incredible time as an entire drum corps with such a fantastic ensemble coordinator, battery designer and program coordinator, and just staff and membership that we're, I guess, going to determine this weekend.
Yep.
So everybody, keep it up. I hope you enjoyed this episode of End Zone to End Zone, and we'll be back with a lot more. Again, if you have any follow-up questions for Dr. Tinkle, for us, or just about future episodes or anything Synced Up has to do, please sound off in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we love doing this because band is fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, band.
yeah.
Yay, bam.
All right. We'll see you next time.